Welcome to the Atheists of Florida YouTube channel. We are pleased to offer some of the most significant speakers and profound issues of our times. If you like today's video, please hit the like button. If you have already subscribed, thank you. If not, you know what to do.
Well, thanks everybody for inviting me on. Judy and I were talking at the very beginning before we all got together about computers in the ancient period. I learned how to program in Fortran in high school in the 70s on a computer that was designed in 1964, GE computer. So that was a long time ago, used core memory and so on. But computers had been my main career. My second book is this one. It's about technology change, and that was a passion of mine after IBM, Microsoft, and so on. After I left those companies, so I worked on that, and then for the past 12, 15 years or so, I guess I've been. Thanks for the link. I've been working on the Christianity atheism question, which is just weird. I mean, it's, I looking back on my career to have left Microsoft to work on a book itself is kind of weird, although it was in technology, and now to get into Christianity and atheism is kind of weird. This is my first book on this topic, Crossexamined. What I was trying to do with Crossexamined is try to, the question I had was, I had a lot of ideas, but what can I say? How can I approach this that would be somehow new? It seems that, Christopher Hitchens and Sam Harris and all these smart people have written stuff. What can I do to add? So that's why this one is a novel. Just real briefly, it's kind of a fun story. You know about the San Francisco earthquake of 1906. That was pretty much concurrent with the beginning of the early Pentecostal movement, and the church called the Azusa Street Church in Los Angeles was this repurposed barn. The early Pentecostal church was worshiping there in the early 1900s. 1902 or 3, I think, is when they started. Just kind of crazy. It would just be kind of like a 24/7 service. And if you felt like you want a little Holy Spirit, you just go and hang out for half an hour, a day, or whatever. There was a pastor, but he didn't really hog the mic. If you had something to say that the Spirit was imposing on you, you just got up and said it. Somebody had an interpretation, they just got up and said it. It was just crazy. Anyway, true story, that was a real church. Another true story about the church was they had a reporter from the LA Times wrote an article about them, during which point somebody said in the church service, I see something terrible happening unless everybody gets a clue and signs up with this new Pentecostal religion. That appeared in the paper the day of the earthquake. Different city, obviously, but it was a huge impact on LA as well as San Francisco. So that is the starting point of the book, the first book. Second book is this one. It's more of a novella, kind of a short book, but this is the basic idea here is modern day. Take the Christmas Carol, Dickens' Christmas Carol idea and impose that on a modern televangelist pastor. Again, fiction. And finally, the one that I'm working on, or I just finished now, is this one. And again, the subtitle, 50 Big Ideas Every Christian Should Understand, is the basic idea. Not trying to beat them over the head, not trying to say they're idiots or stupid. I'm just saying, as a Christian, you're saddled with this baggage. This is just the case. The Bible says this. Christian tradition says this, whatever it is. So FYI, do with it what you want. If you want to become a stronger Christian, fine. If you want to become an atheist, fine. That's not the point. The point is just FYI. And so many Christians, if you confronted them, they probably admit it. They go to church because of tradition. They were raised that way. They really don't know much of the, they didn't go to seminary. And even in seminary, they're going to give you kind of an angle on this kind of stuff. Oh, by the way, as I talk, I don't really have a presentation plan. I thought we would sort of ramble off onto topics that interest you, articles that I've written or whatever. So let me just give another few minutes just to sort of wrap up this sort of intro. So that's the latest book I've been working on with the sort of the underlying framework for my last 12, 15 years has been a blog that I've been working on. As Judy mentioned, I have about 1,600 articles in it, been working on for over a decade, formerly at Pathios.com. The atheists there were, after a while, not welcome. So we went off and formed our own group, Only Sky. That's kind of interesting by itself. Pathios was founded by two people who had kind of noble intentions. They wanted to have a religious space, and I believe at the time it was the largest space on the internet for just religion in general. There were three flavors of Christianity. There were non-believers, Hindus, Buddhists, 10 other categories of religious thought. And we were welcome there, and that was the idea. Party on, as long as you're more or less civil, not a problem. The organization got a little bit more conservative. The story goes that as Hemant Mehta or one of the other atheist loudmouths would say something that would directly affect somebody on the board, they would say, can we shut this guy down? And the answer is no. That's we don't work that way. So after they kicked us off, now they can shut us down. So the rule that we were given about a year and a half ago, or the choice, you can stay here and be nice and not attack Christianity and just say, well, I'm an atheist, for example. I'm an atheist, and here's what I think, or here's my views on the world, or whatever. That's fine. But if you say something that's going to make a Christian sad, well, we can't have that. So anyway, that was then, and now we're all on Pathios.com. Only Sky. Judy mentioned a couple of people on there. Hemant Mehta is on there. Neil Carter, some other people. So now we're having a go, seeing how that's going to work. It's been going on for about a year. OnlySky.media. And I probably talked too much about myself. If anybody has any ideas to steer in different directions, please chime in. I have I write 2 to 3 articles per week, roughly. One of the challenges that I have, Judy also mentioned this. What I'm trying to do with the book is make it available online for free. So I'm putting out a chapter a week on YouTube, as a podcast, and as a blog post. So, one thing I kind of neglected to mention, the whole point of the book. There we go. Every chapter looks like that. So I've got the chapter number, title, 2-minute Christianity. The whole point is you can read this in 2 minutes briefly. It'd be nice to spend a little bit more time on it, but that's the book. It all the chapters look like that. So I'm hoping to make it more inviting. Judy, do you want to jump in and steer things? Yes, if you want to?
I would like to.
Yeah, if anybody has any questions or wants to steer it, please.
I would suggest you consider doing some short videos with your chapters, because most younger people are really into videos and they're not going to read. And they now have YouTube now has a short thing that can be it can be any length you want, but the 2-minute video would just really fit into that quite nicely, I think.
Yeah, with TikTok being a popular format, TikTok, I guess this, 45 seconds to a minute is kind of what they're going for. So either that or, but I mean, to your point, the huge success of TikTok shows that a very small video would be palatable. Yeah.
I have a need to know if you have a chapter in your book on hell.
Not as such. Actually, one thing that I could just sort of expand on, one of the chapters I just put up to come out in a couple of weeks is this will sort of illustrate what the goal of the book, the two different versions of the Ten Commandments. So, and this is just so basic, so fundamental, and yet, if you quiz Christians, how many are going to know this? Moses goes up, gets the Ten Commandments, comes back down, golden calf, gets mad, smashes the tablets, goes back up and gets another set.
Right.
Okay. That second set was not broken, and that went into the Ark of the Covenant. So that's the official one in the Bible, where the first place, maybe the only place, but certainly the first place where it says 10 Commandments is this second set. God said, I'm going to write down the stuff I put on the previous tablets, which you broke. Same information. The first set is in Exodus 20. The second set is in Exodus 34. This gets into a peripheral question of why it takes 14 chapters to, get through that. But anyway, so you read they gave you the second set. It's not at all the same.
Right.
It's
I thought there were 3 sets.
Well, there are 3 sets. The third set, which I believe is in Deuteronomy, is a slight variation on the Exodus 20 version. I don't suppose all of us know the documentary hypothesis, so let me just really briefly go over that. What explains? I mean, somebody saw the book of Exodus and read this and must have had a clue that these are not the same thing, and he still let it go. The final editor or something. You can sort of imagine. How is this possible? And the documentary hypothesis explains this. The Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, came from, with this thinking, 4 different sources. You can, if you look at where it says Elohim versus Yahweh, that sort of divides the Pentateuch into 2. You see there are other clues, but one is that the priestly source, which I believe is the first version, the Exodus 20, that's from one source, and Exodus 34 came from a different source. So that's why they're so different. But you have these nutty Christian conservatives who want to see the 10 Commandments in public. And I mean, from my standpoint, I say, great, do it. Show all 3. Show what a ridiculous Bible you've got.
Yeah.
If you mention this to them, if you push back and said, why are you picking that one? Why not the other one? I like the other one better. They wouldn't have any idea what you're talking about.
Right.
So this is part of the challenge of let's first get a baseline. Let's first understand the sand you're building on. Once we got that, then we can worry about whether it makes any sense for you to be a Christian or not.
Right. Jim?
Yes, one of the most interesting things about the Pentateuch is the fact that almost all the penalties for the violation of any of the commandments calls for death. And if religiously inclined people wish to carry that out without any further ado, why, they'd all be dead.
Exactly. Yeah, I believe one out of the 10 Commandments in Exodus 20, the semi-official set, even though it's quite the opposite, 9 out of 10 are capital punishment.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right.
And you get killed for boiling a lamb in its mother's milk?
Yeah, that one fascinates me, and that by itself is in several places, not associated necessarily with the 10 Commandments, but in the
it's the 10th commandment.
It's a 10th commandment in the Exodus 34 set, exactly, but it's also in other places.
Yeah.
And that, just, we're on the topic of things being ridiculous, that apparently is the origin of the kosher laws. So, why can't you have a cheeseburger with meat and dairy? because you can't eat a kid boiled in its mother's milk. How does that follow?
I don't know.
And I remember I was reading this from Jewish sources, and there's like 10, 12 different interpretations of like what the problem is. I mean, is it that it's just crazy, ironic, cruel to kill a young thing and use its mother's milk as part of that? Is it some sort of incest kind of thing? Is it health related? If you look at the Mary Douglas has got a good analysis of the larger view of kosher laws. You can't eat carp, you can't eat shellfish. And the idea was, from her standpoint, you can't eat certain kinds of fish because they're not real fish. What's a fish? Well, I know what a fish is. It's got scales and it swims in the water, right? Well, a shrimp kind of has scales, but not really. Clams, obviously not. So it's not official. And if you look at the cloven hoof thing, deer have cloven hoofs and cows, and that's fine. Pigs don't. They're gross. They're not real animals, so we can't eat those. So that was her innovation, I guess, or addition to the topic. But you're absolutely right. This goat boiled in its mother's milk is the origin, the foundation of the kosher laws.
It's all very arbitrary and silly, and it seems to me it well illustrates the propensity of all religions to want to control every aspect of a person's life,
Right.
whether it be the food they eat, the clothing they wear, what they read, what they think, whatever. There's a commandment or rule or some means by which the priestly class can control you in some way.
613, apparently.
Okay.
Scott, do you have a question or comment?
Well, so can you hear me there now?
Yes.
Fine.
All right, great. Pigs, you get trigonosis from them and they kill you. So that's why that's why you're always supposed to cook pork real well to kill any, but if you ate it, like they didn't always cook things real well, didn't have the time or the ability to cook things. And if you eat raw pork, you can get trigonosis and die. It's that, and polar bears carry trigonosis. There are some other diseases that you can get from eating clams and shrimp. And what was the other thing that I had? And certain, you were mentioning carp. Certain carp don't have scales. They have a slimy coating. So I can see, like some of that kosher, I fully understand. That's all I had to say.
Well, and I've heard that it's actually a safety issue, a health issue, and if you look at it with modern eyes, you think, wow, weren't these early Jews smart about this? Maybe it almost is godly somehow. My understanding is that's just not the case. That it's a nice story, but you can get sick from eating uncooked, poorly cooked pork, or chicken, or beef, or elk, or whatever. Jim, I just wanted to touch also on one of the points you made. You were talking about the punishments for the breaking the Ten Commandments. That I think is kind of key in some other issues. You get it, the right is very anti-homosexuality. In the Bible, it says kill them.
Yes.
So, okay, so you're going to use the Bible to conclude that homosexual, this is not you, of course. This is not you being grossed out by gay people. This is just the Bible. What can I do? I just got to, admire what God says. God says homosexuality is bad. Kill them. So, are you okay with the killing part? I think this is kind of helpful for responding to some of their nonsense on the right. Also, I know Greg Kokel has gotten a fair amount of this on the abortion question. He's saying, look, abortion is murder. So, therefore it's bad. That's what he wants to say. Now, what I want to say is, and therefore we must kill the women who have abortions. I mean, is that what you're saying? Are you okay with the ramifications of your, bringing God in? You can't just have him put a foot in the door. He's either in or out, and in means the punishments as well.
It always struck me as being a bit ironic that the punishment for killing someone is killing them.
And we hate the Canaanites, and aren't they bad for child sacrifice? I mean, they're obviously bad. So let's kill them all, including the children.
Yes.
They killed 1 out of 100 children. We're going to kill all the children and all the adults and all the women and children, everybody.
We'll show them. Yeah, so it violates social norms of our present moment to such a degree that it's hard to imagine anybody will be willing to defend it. But there are.
I mean, you might have heard there was a recent survey talking about the shrinking of the fraction of the U.S. population that is Christian. It just the increase in the nuns, none of the above people like us, just keeps increasing. So it seemed like Europe was kind of 20 years ago. Europe was way ahead of us on this, and it's kind of embarrassing being an American. But that certainly has changed lately.
Jim, did you have something else you wanted to bring up? Jim?
Not at the moment.
Okay.
But just wait, I'll have something.
Okay.
I was just leaving through the book, just trying to find points to that I think are glaringly obvious, like the 2 sets of 10 commandments. They're very into prophecy. That you read the Old Testament with Christian eyes, and you think, oh my God, there's Jesus, and there and there and there. They'll talk about hundreds of prophecies, and they're just ridiculous. But one of the ones is the Isaiah 7:14 virgin birth one. And if you read Matthew, he mentions several prophecies, one being this. And when you go back to Isaiah 7:14, it is a prophecy, kind of, but it is right in that time. It's talking about when there's a woman, the woman who's a virgin, which women are before they have sex. So I mean there's no magic here. She will get pregnant, again, nothing magic, have a baby when the son is able to differentiate good from bad, sort of a fanciful way, I suppose, of saying that when he turns 12, when it becomes a little bit mature, so some number of years, then what we're talking about will come to pass. And what will come to pass is the prophet talking to a king: your enemies will be defeated. So it was a prophecy in that time. And then you look at Isaiah 7:14, you look at Isaiah 7, and you think, show me Jesus in this, right? I mean, if you want to distill down Jesus into a sentence, died for our sins, resurrected, miracles. Okay, where is that in 7:14? Where is that in this book? If you read it at face value, makes sense. Nothing to do with Jesus.
Yeah, he had a really bad weekend for your sins. Linda, Linda, you
No,
had-
there we go. Did you know that the Bible is pro-abortion?
Tell me.
Yeah, there's one part, and I wish I knew which part it was, where they have a man who suspected his wife of adultery and that the child she was carrying was not his. So you know what the test is that the woman drinks or partakes of bitter water. And if the baby survives and she doesn't have a miscarriage, then it's his baby. But if she has a miscarriage, then she's guilty of adultery.
actually, it wasn't just bitter water, it was dust off the floor and some other disgusting things out of the holy house. Or
They had the priest would write down this spell or potion or whatever, and they would rinse off the ink in the water. So the ink, went into the water, including the dirt from, where they killed all the animals.
Right.
And she would drink that. Yeah. I think I did read this in some depth, and I think the question is not the issue was is she guilty of adultery or not? It's not kill it if it's not mine, and preserve it if it is mine. But either way, I mean, you look at the punishment. If she's guilty, that's abortion.
Yeah, it's a form of pro-abortion, because if the Bible is against abortion, why would they use that as a punishment?
And as an aside, it is sort of amusing to see the euphemisms they use. Her thigh will swell or shrivel or whatever. Thighs? I mean, what do legs have to do with anything? So then there's another one where Ruth, the story of Ruth. She her mother-in-law Naomi, and they were together after all their husbands died, and Naomi was trying to get Ruth taken care of, and so she encouraged her to sleep with Boaz. So she uncovered his feet, which is, again, okay. He likes a massage on his feet. I mean, where are you going with this? But anyway, it's kind of amusing seeing the Bible's euphemisms.
I put it's Numbers 5:11-28. I'll put it in the chat. Linda, I'm sorry, were you through? You're muted, Linda.
Sorry. Also, one of the versions of the 10 Commandments, there's only one that's mentioned, like they have the 3 different versions. In one of them, it mentions that you can't wear mixed fibers.
Yeah, they have mixed fibers, and I remember reading about early America, and there was a fabric called linsey woolsey. If you remember that from when you were in 2nd grade or something, that was what I remember reading about it. But it's linen and wool, so it's a mixture of linen and wool, which is exactly what the Bible says you shouldn't do.
Yeah. Okay, another question I have, and this is have you ever heard of something called the Clergy Project?
I have.
Okay. Just wondered.
Yeah, it's a great project. Linda, somebody, and Dennett, one of the 4 horsemen, worked on it together, and it's a fascinating project. I mean, just the idea of clergy who are sort of, it's almost like sci-fi. I mean, they're imprisoned in this job of theirs that they don't believe in anymore. Let me just give you a quick anecdote. I have an acquaintance here in Seattle. He was in a Texas church, some sort of Baptist denomination. Nice life as a pastor. He's the big man on campus in his town. He had a parsonage, 4,000 square foot house for him and his family. Within his own mind, he was sort of drifting away from the dictates of this pretty strict conservative Baptist religion. He talked with his superiors, and they agreed, well, it's probably best. They both agreed that that's probably best that you sort of find an exit. He had his swan song service, and he said within 5 minutes he lost his job, he lost his wife, he lost his parsonage, he lost his house, he lost his career. He was just gone. He went back for his daughter's wedding, which was again in the church. He left, no one else did. His daughter's wedding was in the church, and they couldn't find a reason to exclude him, but he had to have minders that would stay with him to make sure he didn't pollute anyone's mind by actually talking to them. So exactly to your point. I mean, this is what can happen. He said he had PTSD for years.
I bet.
This was when we were talking about this was in the early days of medical marijuana, and he found that very helpful for his PTSD. Scary. He even said that he was just completely alone in the 6 months, a year afterwards. He said he kept a gun in his nightstand as just if it got too bad, he knew he had a way out. He never used it, of course, but it was sort of a comfort in a bizarre way. But I mean, imagine PTSD in this situation, but it's his entire life, including his career.
Yeah. Scott?
Did he ever find a new job?
He did. He found a new job. This is kind of personal, but it's he's anonymous, so it probably doesn't matter. He was married to his wife in this Baptist wife for 20 years. They had sex 12 times. So, it just in this strange, weird world, and he found a new wife, and much more compatible. So just night and day. But yeah, he's working here in Seattle.
Great. Thank you, Linda. Scott, you had something?
Yeah, I missed the point of it. I got a crack all over my speakers, and I didn't hear, what did the guy do to get booted out? You said he did something, and 24 hours later he was booted. What was that?
What it was he, as he was preaching, and for 6 months or so, he was sort of, his sermons, he was sort of torn, but what he wanted to say was drifting away from what standard conventional Baptist preaching was. So he knew he was drifting away. He knew this just didn't make any sense, for him. But he really had an obligation to this community, which he loved. Of course, he'd been with them for many years, and it just wasn't right. He wasn't treating them right, he felt. So he talked with his superiors and said, here's the issue. I'm thinking I need to leave. And they said, yeah, we think we need to leave too. So, it was sort of graceful from that point on. But then again, and it wasn't 24 hours, it was 5 minutes. 5 minutes after he lost after he said goodbye, basically in his sermon, parsonage gone, wife gone, job gone, career gone, goodbye.
So,
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you for the clarification.
someone came to me, we were talking about, she has a friend who's a Christian, and she was saying that they don't follow the Old Testament because Jesus came to replace the Old Testament. That's not exactly right, but sort of like that. And but they get the 10 Commandments out of the Old Testament, and they get a lot of things out of the Old Testament. And I know that Jesus said, I didn't come, I know Joe Reinhardt can quote this by exactly, I can't. I didn't come to replace the laws of the Old Testament. I came to enforce them, or something to that effect. Is that true that new Christians don't follow the Old Testament?
It would be by denomination, I think, and you certainly can question Christians today and say, and it's even to the extent of Jesus would say, "You've heard it said that X, but I say Y. You've heard this said that that it's okay to divorce your wife, but I say don't, whatever." So you've got that. You had Jesus himself contradicting the Old Testament. I mean, how is it even possible? I mean, did God not have a clue that he has to correct? Did God forget? Is this a new religion? What's going on here? How is this possible that the Old Testament teaching is not exactly appropriate for us today? Because God said it. I mean, it's been 3,000 years, but who cares? If God has moral principles, they should be timeless. So you're right. You've got this dichotomy between the two books. You may be familiar with the Marcionites and the Gnostics. So in the early days of Christianity, there were just a quick clarification. This is Bart Ehrman's point. He refers to what he calls proto-Orthodox. So the people in the early days whose thinking would become orthodoxy. Mm-hmm. So in the 50s, 60s, 80s, during the first century, there are lots of different groups that disagreed with each other. So, at that time, it was not at all clear who was going to win. Now we know, and we can go back and single out those people. But I mean, that doesn't mean, because we embrace it now, not us, of course, but Christians, doesn't mean that it's, objectively correct. And just a quick thought mention on the Marcionites and Ebionites. The problem of evil says, why would a good God let bad things happen to good people? You know, more or less. And it's often said to be the toughest problem in Christianity. In fact, Bart Ehrman said that was the question that pushed him over the edge. But you look at something like Gnosticism and Marcionites, the Marcionites, what they said was, yes, we worship Jesus. He comes from a different guy.
Right.
The guy who's in charge now, well, I guess apocalypticism applies in this as well. But you have all kinds of different interpretations where if you follow them, they would jettison on purpose the Old Testament. And with that, the problem of evil goes away. So the problem of evil is very relevant for a very challenging problem for Christians today. Not so for Marcionites or Gnostics or perhaps even apocalypticists.
Are there Marcionites left?
I don't believe so. No, I mean, and the idea of Marcion was kind of late. He was like early 2nd century, but and he was one of the pioneers in creating a canon. You know, out of all these bazillion writings, letters, and whatnot that we have, just this small set is the official ones, and the other ones we're not beholden to, and obviously that included not the Old Testament.
But I understand they were very, very popular. The Marcionites.
They were indeed, yeah.
Exactly.
Not the Gnostics is just when you hear about the Gnostics, it's just nutty stuff. I mean, they got secrets because when you die, I mean, there are all these people around here. A very few have got this magic spark. The rest of them are just meat puppets. The rest of them are just robots. Animated mud, whatever. So for those of us in the inner circle who've got this spark, let me tell you, when you die, you gotta, there are passwords or there are forks in the road. You've got to make the right. It's a tough path to get back to heaven. But let me tell you how to do it. Just another quick thought on apocalypticism, which is kind of fascinating. In the New Testament, you can find these clues to these other, incompatible clues to these other philosophies. And one of the ideas behind apocalypticism, number one, it's happening soon, like soon within months or a few years. And we see that with Jesus saying, there are those of us standing here who will not die until all this has come to pass. So that's one attribute that we see there. Also, apocalypticism says, right now, the world is controlled by the bad guy, and it will soon be controlled by the good guy. And they turn that is called an age. And if you look in the New Testament, you find the age all over the place. And one of the thoughts they have is if you're prospering now, well, that can only be because that's what the bad guy wants to happen. Therefore, you're not a good person. So when you have something in the Bible, the last will be first and the first shall be last. That's exactly apocalypticism. So all the people who are profiting today, in a couple of years, some small amount of time, it's going to be completely reversed. And all those of you who are suffering now, you're going to have followed me, and we will be on the side of the good guy.
Okay. Joe?
Yes, one point quickly about the Old Testament, which you passed over changed topics a long time ago, but and I've mentioned it before, and that is there's a new game called the Old Testament game. And the idea is you take the Bible, you open it to any page at random of the Old Testament, and you point to a verse. And the idea is to see who's the first one that has to go to prison.
I like it.
Yes,
Maybe you can work that into a drinking game too.
I'm sure.
Well, it's the same idea.
Anybody else, before I ask my next question, anybody else want to ask anything?
I'll just to follow up on some of the health issues we were talking about with kosher rules. One of the articles that I have in the new book is, why does the Bible not have a recipe for soap? And if, again, this is sort of a thing you learn in elementary school, but I remember, pioneer kind of things. The soap is actually not that hard to make. You
No, it isn't.
take ashes from wood and you put water through it, and that gives you potassium hydroxide. It's lye, but
Yes,
the water
lye.
will rinse out the lye. You mix that with fat, and then you cook it. So it's not that hard. And if you imagined God giving you even a 3-sentence recipe, I mean, it wouldn't be that hard. And if you had a priesthood, they would perfect it, figure out how this works. God could let us know how to make the soap, how to use it, how to cite latrines, how hand washing works, how tea would work, boil the water before you drink it, all that kind of stuff. Not a word in the Bible. We're told very helpfully, don't eat pigs. But we're not told how to make soap. So,
Yes.
where's the God's priorities here?
Yeah, it was like late or sometime in the 1800s, I think, when doctors figured out if they wash their hands, so many women wouldn't die in childbirth if they washed them
Lister,
every day.
Semmelweis, exactly. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, okay, everybody, come on, speak up. Or you're gonna have to listen to me.
Overheard.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead. The Bible talks about men sleeping with men as if they were women, but it never addresses lesbianism. Does it?
There's a passage in something that Paul wrote. I forgot where, but if you look at the anti-gay writings in Paul, you hear about that. If I recall, so number one, that section does touch on lesbianism to some extent. But if I recall correctly, it's one of these things where, at first glance you think, that's interesting. I'm not sure what to make of that. But then, the errors in the logic, sort of make
It
themselves.
does, the Bible does say that women cannot dress in men's clothing.
Right.
It's not that as much as there's another passage. I'm drawing a blank. Wish I had that in front of me. But the point is, it imagines this topsy-turvy world where men would have unnatural desires for other men. So I'm thinking, if you have a straight man and you force him to have relations with another man, that's unnatural. I get it. That's bad. Is that what you're talking about? This is not talking about what we see today, which is, I mean, just the idea of homosexuality, where loving couples can be of different or the same sex, not a concept back then. So when you look at this, I mean, it's very easy to lampoon it by saying that it's talking about the unnatural. The unnatural part of it is not these people are unnatural. It's in my hypothetical example, I imagine putting men with men. That's unnatural. Yes, it is, which is not anything to do with homosexuality.
Well, it seems to me that it's pretty clear that the most vehemently anti-homosexual people throughout history have been closet homosexuals or very leaning towards homosexuality themselves.
And then when you have young men are not now as much, but 20, 30, 40 years ago, young men would be told being gay is very bad. So they say, well, I still have these feelings. I see that they're bad. I'm buying that. What can I do with my life? Well, you become a pastor. It's not a pastor, a priest. You become a priest. So this idea forces all the homosexuals into the priesthood, which if you think about it, not at all, that kind of makes sense. This is a nice, safe place where all the gay haters go. So I hate gays, so I'm going to go there. But in practice, it doesn't make much sense.
True. I do have one question about the at the time of the Bible, it was pretty male dominated. Did they ever even think about that women would be with women? I mean, I know.
Great question. I mean, you see so much, I guess in biology you call it sexual dimorphism, but I mean, you know, men and women are treated very differently. And, you know, it's written by men, it's aimed at men.
Yeah.
Women are property. So yeah, I guess it's not surprising that you would have certain rules for men and certain rules for women. One nice scholarly article that I read was talking about homosexual acts in that period, and they were, you know, if you there are three ways, if I can remember them, that homosexuality was understood in this period. One was as they would be in prison today. Let's say it would be a domination. So you beat another army or whatever, so you can humiliate him in this fashion. That's one way. Another way is if you are away from your wife or you're not married or whatever, and you're rich and you have a servant. Well, that's again not the best way, but what the heck. And there was one other approach which, you know, again is understandable from our standpoint. Oh, I know what it was. It was the idea that, and this isn't specific to Judaism, but in that period again, you have fertility rights. And one of the fertility rights was the farmer who needs rain, or not rain as much as crops that do well. He will imaginarily, as the idea is you imagine planting that seed in a priest. That was the idea. And that was not a Jewish idea. This was somewhere else, which is why they didn't like it. If you do that, you're being like the Midianites, or, you know, God knows who, the other guys. Bad. God, Yahweh doesn't like that. He wants you to, you know, follow his rules. Which again, I think this was one of Jim's points, that there are all these, you know, rules and 613 rules and whatever. That being one of them. Don't do that. That's what the other guys do. We circumcise ourselves. We don't eat pigs, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So again, I guess the more global point, the larger point is, when you get behind some of these prohibitions, some of these rules, and you know, take them at face value and say, you know, expand on that. You know, what is the point you're making? Let me understand exactly what you're saying. When you get into it, you read the text, it often falls apart.
Although they did tend to view women in dichotomy, Boar or Madonna. So.
A good point. Yeah.
No.
But of course, you know, Mary being this almost the fourth person of the Trinity, she was a virgin. So that, you know, separates her. To be an ordinary human woman is not an option.
She was
You know,
only about 12. She was only about
we
12
own
years
them.
old.
So.
Wasn't she only about 12 years old, Mary?
It sounds right. Yeah, I think sexual maturity happened later then than it does now, but still, you know, young.
Yeah. Linda, sorry to keep you waiting.
Yeah, sorry. I'm wondering if the problem with the Bible is not so much homosexuality in general as it is with transgenderism, because when they say about it's considered abhorrent for a woman to dress as a man or for a man to have feminine manners, I wonder if they're speaking more about transgenderism rather than homosexuality. That the Bible's against transgenderism because this challenges the proper order of things.
I wonder, I almost get a sense that this is like the kosher rules we were talking about you can eat meat as long as it's from a proper animal. You know, don't get me started on pigs. They don't have cloven hoofs. They're weird. Don't get me started on shellfish, that kind of thing. So I wonder if that is
Yeah.
relevant here.
Yeah, because the problem with transgenderism with them would be that if a woman dresses in man's clothes, then she's challenging the man's authority.
Perhaps
if she's
so.
acting like a man.
Yeah.
And a man is degrading himself to the level of a woman if he's got feminine manners. Mhm. Yeah, but actually hair, oh, sorry.
My bad, sorry.
Actually, hair was very closely associated with sexuality in the Middle East, because in the Middle East, if a man was a eunuch, he couldn't grow a beard. So in the Middle East, during those times, like a big bearded man was virile, right? Whereas one without a beard was either too young to be a man, or he was a eunuch, or he wanted to do the ways of a woman, right?
Mm.
And so in the Middle East, even now, a man shows his beard, that's his pride, but a woman always has to hide her hair, because hair equals sexuality. So a woman's supposed to hide her sexuality except to her husband, and a man, it's okay for him to show his sexuality to the world. So I'm wondering if the Bible has huge thing in transgenderism, because that threatens that line of thinking. It threatens the establishment, so to speak.
Yeah, I haven't seen that. That's interesting.
Yeah.
But didn't Paul, was it Paul, say that women had to cover their hair in church because the demons hid in the hair and came out and tempted men?
I haven't seen that, but maybe so.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, but yeah, so that's why I'm thinking that because transgenderism and homosexuality are two separate issues, even though they're kind of mishmashed right now because of the politics. Because a transgendered person, like I personally knew someone who dressed as a woman, but he biologically was male and he was attracted to women. Whereas a homosexual could be perfectly happy with their gender. They could be a masculine homosexual or a feminine homosexual, and they don't want to change their gender, but they're just attracted to someone of the same gender. Like, they're two different things.
Yeah.
So when you're reading passages like about men and women in the Bible, I think one has to be careful not to lump it all in homosexuality. When reading passages like, oh, it's important for a woman to wear a man's clothes, because not all homosexual women want to be men.
Hmm.
And not all transgender people are homosexual. You know, so it's two different issues. And I think most people, they don't see that. They don't pay attention to that enough when interpreting the Bible and what it has to say about these issues. Well, that's my soapbox anyways.
So I have another question, unless someone else wants to ask something.
I just wanted to add what Linda said and what we've really been talking about, and the fact that we have to even bother to discuss the Bible in this fashion. And that is, it is very unfortunate that the almighty, omnipotent, supreme being is unable to write coherently.
Well, that leads right into what I was going to ask, which is about the chapter on God lying. And your example of telling Adam and Eve that if they eat of the tree of the fruit of the tree of knowledge, sorry, butchered that, they would die. But then it also says that Adam lived to be 930 years old. But do we know how old he was when he ate the apple or the fruit?
I mean, I would assume, he could be, days, months, or a few years old. So I would assume quite young.
I mean,
And that gets into the whole question of, they were immature mentally as well, and they had not yet eaten the fruit. So if you haven't eaten the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, and you're given a morality test, how can you how can anybody complain when you fail? Of course you can. You haven't eaten the fruit yet.
yeah.
So, after they eat the fruit, they might be ashamed or embarrassed or whatever. That's fine. But, the story sort of falls apart. I mean, I've seen attempts to show the snake as Prometheus. He gives a gift to mankind, and we're all better for it. And God celebrates Solomon for being wise.
Yes.
I guess wisdom's a good thing. So I guess eating being wise because of the fruit is a good thing. Where's the problem with this? I mean, you've got all these stories which clash in the same book.
Yeah.
I'm
But,
sorry. I'm sorry to keep making jokes, but the Bible and religion in general are a joke. But recent studies have shown that absolutely 100% of men will accept a piece of fruit from a naked woman.
And God made them that way, so he shouldn't have been surprised.
That's right.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Exactly.
There's a video, Dark Matter 2525. You probably have seen some of their videos, but their version of the tree is, God asked his helper, and you put that tree in, right? It was, oh yeah, I put it far away. I made the fruit smell terrible. It's across vast deserts. They'll never find it. And God says, no, that's not the point. Put it in there, make it attractive, So God could only put it in there if he wanted them to eat it. But of course, it's all just a fairy tale. So it has to follow certain tropes of fairy tales.
Yes. Thank you, Joe. Mr. Young.
I just want to ask, it appears I'm late. Has there been a time change in the United States that I
Yes,
don't
there
know about?
has.
There, oh, so it's 6 o'clock now. It's not 5.
That's correct.
Okay, well, I apologize for being late.
It should have been.
So I guess I missed out on the good part.
Well, that's still the good part. We're just discussing the Bible and all the things that are wrong with it.
It'll only take a few more minutes. We're almost done.
Okay.
No, I don't think you could ever be done if you're discussing all the things that could be that are wrong with it. Can I make a short comment since that I know that what the topic is here now? Would you give me 2 minutes?
Yes, I'll give you 2 minutes, of course.
I'm having a conversation with a relative who is a fundamentalist Christian, and I am critical of the ethical and moral bankruptcy of Christianity, and she takes the time to point out that Jesus says that we must love our neighbor as ourselves. So I sent her 5 principles of my list of ethical and moral principles, which I knew from the get-go were absolutely necessary for anyone to love another person who is different than they are. You can't possibly love somebody without appreciating and aspiring to these principles. And she rejected every single one of them. And so I pointed out to her, this is going back and forth with emails, that it's impossible to love your neighbor, much less as yourself, without aspiring to and embracing these principles. Now, I haven't heard back from her again, but this is one of the major problems with Christianity, is they use this slogan, "Thou shalt love your neighbor as yourself," and none of them know what it means, and they can't love their different neighbor at all, period. Now, I agree liberal Christians overcome that, but fundamentalists cannot love their different neighbors. They hate them. They treat them like shit. So this is a major flaw in the Bible because it doesn't tell them how to love their different neighbor. That's all I got.
I'll just give a quick thought on that. Very often, love your neighbor means love your fellow Jew. So it doesn't mean love everybody. It doesn't mean love who's next door to you, no matter who they are. It's just love your fellow neighbor in our small tribe.
What about loving your enemy?
Yeah.
I would suspect that I mean, that could be different, but I would suspect that that's also love your enemy who's a Jew. I mean, the guy who cuts his Moses lawn at 6 a.m. Well, he's a
Right.
fellow Jew, so we gotta
Love your enemy and love your neighbor because they're usually the same person.
Yes.
Just wondering, what is a Moses lawn?
Moses lawn. It's one that parts itself.
Yeah, nice.
Gus, you have a comment, question?
Back when you were talking about the Adam and Eve story in the Garden of Eden, I tend to think that God must have made Adam and Eve very, very dumb, because in the Garden of Eden, in addition to that tree of knowledge, there was also the tree of life. Now, had they had any brains at all, they'd have gone over to that tree of life and eaten from it first, and only then gone over to that tree of knowledge. Also, there's the fact that in the biblical story, the serpent, supposedly Satan, told them that they would not die. And did they really have any reason to doubt this serpent? He may have been trustworthy in their point of view. So, yeah, it's kind of a messed up story all around with some loose ends there that need to be taken care of. I just wanted to throw that in.
I think if you look at the precedents, the other stories of great floods and that sort of thing, that where the Old Testament gets its inspiration from the other neighbors in the ancient Near East. What I've heard is that their idea of a tree of life was something that you would, it's like food. If you eat food, you keep living, but if you got to keep eating it. You can't just, well, I ate last month, so I mean, I guess I'm good. I think that was the idea they had about the tree of life.
Well, then you have to ask yourself the same thing about that other tree then. Maybe its fruit only lasted a while too.
I suppose so. I'm not, again, going back to the, we would have to go back to the precedents in the ancient Near East to find out, if there was a parallel. I haven't heard of one about the knowledge of good and evil, but in the case of life, and that's why they put a cherubim and a flaming sword by the Garden of Eden, so they couldn't go back to eat the tree of life. But again, I do believe it was the kind of tree you have to eat from repeatedly.
Now, reading the Bible, I don't think so, because there's some discussion there amongst the Elohim, I think it is, that to the effect that if they went on to eat from that tree of life, they would become as gods.
That is about the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
But in conjunction.
No, that is not about the tree of good and evil. That is about the tree of life. And in the verse he's referring to is Genesis 3:20, which says that they had to put the cherubims to block the tree of life, lest they reach forth their hand and take from the tree of life and eat and live forever.
So anyway, I tend to think of religious people. I call them the pretzel people, because they have to twist themselves into all sorts of contortions to make their arguments go. That's all I have to say.
And then your point about the Satan being the serpent is also not at all there in the Old Testament. It's a imagine if kind of thing coming from
that's why I said supposedly Satan.
Right. But it's one of these things where it's sort of fundamental to their worldview, and yet you think, just read it. It doesn't say that.
As is so often the case, it isn't what is said, it's what isn't said. God goes to all the trouble to drive them out of the Garden of Eden and tells Eve that all women will suffer pain in childbirth and on, but he never says a word about hell or the hereafter. which is, of course, the most important part of what he has to offer.
Well, but Jews, I didn't think Jews believed in hell and hereafter. That's why one of the reasons I asked you about hell up at the front was because I've been watching Genetically Modified Skeptic, and he did a whole thing on hell. And
Well, was there no hell until the New Testament? It didn't exist until 2,000 years ago.
The idea of Sheol is found in the Old Testament.
Yes, I know. I know that the Jews don't really have a formal hell. Nevertheless, it's the idea of eternal punishment is absolutely the key piece of a Christian dogma. Their whole religion is built on the carrot and the stick.
That belief came from Zoroastrianism and was a later addition to the Jewish. It later influenced just before Jesus.
Well, that's
for most of Jewish
bother,
history, there was no hell. It was
God doesn't
basically
bother to
just
mention
being
it.
dead.
You know, it's
What,
so
Joe?
important to him. He doesn't even bother to mention it. Childbirth is important, but not hell.
thanks, Joe. Jim,
Yeah.
something else? Jim Young, sorry.
Yes, I think that in the Genesis story, a big flaw is that God would have had to be incredibly stupid to put a tree of life that offered immortality. Just putting it in the garden, when you're going to put a tree in there that offers death, to me, God would have to be incredibly stupid, or he knew in advance that they were never going to be able to eat that from that tree of life. And the second point I'll make is modern day Christianity ignores the fact that in Genesis, the very reason why God put the cherubims with flaming swords to guard the way of the tree of life was make damn sure that human beings never got to live forever. But now Christians claim that everybody lives forever. We either live forever in heaven or we live forever in a lake of fire. So the whole damn thing cannot withstand scrutiny. That's all.
Thank you, Jim Young.
Actually, not all forms of Christianity believe in the fire hell. The Jehovah's Witness don't. And actually that concept of hell came from Jesus' time when they saw the garbage burning in the dump in Gehenna. And and because people are always burning garbage in the dump, the fire never went out. And that's where that image of hell came from. Before then, it was Sheol or Hades, which were both dark places, which had nothing to do with fire.
Yes, so the question is, what did Jesus think hell was, if there was such a thing as a Jesus? What was his view of hell?
There is the story of the rich man and Lazarus, which I guess comes from Jesus. And in that one, the rich man is burning in hell and begs for just a drop of water to cool his tongue. So that's a pretty apocalyptic view of hell, of the afterlife. Although I don't think it's consistent. I mean, I think if you want to find different interpretations, again, the New Testament is written by a number of different authors, and I think you can find different interpretations of that.
I think personally that's a very good point to bring up. And the Gospels present the argument that Jesus believed all the things that it presents that he believed. But if there was a Jesus, we don't have any clue what he believed, none whatsoever. In reality.
Yeah, it's a crazy situation when you've got a religion, and yet the supposed founder, unless you want to say Paul's the founder, the supposed founder didn't write anything. You know, he didn't write some manifesto. You know, the Unabomber, he wrote a manifesto, right? And Jesus can't figure that out.
Apparently not. Jim Peterson?
Yes, well, I wanted to add a note about the context. The context of the Bible and all of its writings and all the things that we deal with on a regular basis here in this discussion, as well as in our society generally, goes without an understanding of the society of that time. That is, I have a feeling that such things as Mithraism and many other kinds of religious expression were predominant because they had no science. But throughout the ancient world, in civilized places and not so civilized places, that people often engaged in elaborate storytelling of the kind that we see in the Bible. And so understanding that context, it seems to me, is kind of essential to really appreciating what all of these fabulous stories really are about. And that was trying to explain the world to people who did not possess the instruments or knowledge to be able to really understand it. What do you think of that?
Yeah, and the world was a pretty scary place at the time.
It was.
So to have some idea that, you know, don't worry about it, may seem a little bit crazy, but you know, the good guy's in charge and he knows best what's good for us, that would probably be comforting. And also, you know, you do wonder how far behind that is going to be the priests seeing this as a means of control. You know, we had good rains last year. Don't mess with me. You know, you gotta do what I say to make sure we continue this good luck.
Again, control.
Yes, a lot of control. Jim, did you have anything else?
No.
Okay, thank you. I'm wondering if you could talk for just a minute and then we'll close it down because I know you must be getting tired. About the claim that religion does a lot of good because of schools and hospitals.
Yeah, the challenge there is you need to put quotation marks around schools and hospitals. So, you know, you've got Oxford and Cambridge and the Sorbonne and some of these, you know, super early schools. Now, of course, colleges. Of course, you find them in China and the Muslim world as well. But let's just set that aside. You have these early schools, and yet when you look at the curriculum, number one, all of it was for the purpose of training clergy, and the curriculum was you know, limited to things that would be, you know, it's theology obviously, but also rhetoric and logic and that sort of thing that would be helpful to being a Christian scholar. So that's what they're talking about. And that's what they're proud of having started, which is, you know, fine as far as it goes. If you look at schools in the U.S., I forgot the first 80 or something mostly were not schools like the University of Washington or North Carolina or whatever, not state schools, but rather Princeton and Harvard and that sort of thing. And in my book, I have a quote from the president of Princeton, I think it is, who said that, and this was, you know, 1800 ballpark, so modern-ish, but his point was, cursed be all knowledge that is not, I'm hand-waving here, honest to the teachings of Christ or supportive of the teachings of Christ. In other words, if this doesn't help anybody get further to Christ, what's the point? Who cares? It's not useful. So when you look at you know, these early schools, they're, you know, that's what they're focused on. So when you point with pride, you know, if you're a Christian, you say, you know, we created universities, and you say, you know, Harvard, Princeton, Stanford, these amazing schools, they got nothing to do with where the Christian origins of universities were. They're just not even close. And if they were, they wouldn't be the world-class institutions that they are today. So, you know, you got to, they want to embrace the age but also mix in what a modern university is, following the evidence wherever it leads, those kind of ideas, which are absolutely not what a Christian would think about. And then on the topic of hospitals, there's stories of some plague in Rome where everyone, just ran to the hill. Everyone who could, all the rich people ran to the hills, except some Christians who stayed and helped. And if you want to point to examples of Christians being big-hearted, generous, great, I love it. More. I'd love to see more of the same. People, Christian or not, can certainly do that. But when you look at what a hospital is, it's built on science. We were talking about the germ theory disease in the 1800s, and just the idea that you as a doctor in the 1850s, I mean, this is quite recent, would go and work on an autopsy, and then you would do your rounds with the women who had just had babies, with no carbolic acid, no antiseptics, no alcohol, no nothing in between. And why would you? I mean, it's just the idea of little teeny weeny things, the germ theory disease, pretty advanced stuff, and God could have told us that in the sentence, but didn't bother. And then just to wrap up this idea about hospitals, you look at Mother Teresa and her hospitals, and this is amazing to me. I think this was in her Nobel Peace Prize acceptance speech. She says the world gains much from the suffering of the people like the ones that she ministers, helps, whatever. And it's just, that is what she sees anyway as a hospital. It's a way to provide some minimal comfort, not even pain meds, right? I mean, certainly not cures for whatever, ails these people. Likely not even pain meds, but, they get fed, they have a blanket. Okay, as far as it goes, that's great. But, they deliberately won't take it the next 20 steps to make it into an actual hospital built on science.
Right.
They're built on Christianity.
When
with science, evidence, do you follow evidence would be the key question, yes or no? And in her case, the answer is no.
I'm sorry. When Mother Teresa had a heart attack right in the Vatican, the Pope didn't come down and cure her. They put her on a private jet, flew her out to the Scripps Institute in Southern California, and they healed her. So
Right.
with the help of God and two friends, she was able to overcome it.
And I'm sure afterwards, she praised God and isn't God marvelous? I remember this always seems to come with disasters, some sort of earthquake or whatever, and it'll be 10 days, and one final person would be found, and the family says, isn't God amazing? And this is I've seen this in within a Muslim context, not just a Christian context. It's sort of a universal thing, and you think, this is how God works. How about God have them found on the first day? How about God making the tsunami not happen?
Right.
Earthquake or whatever it was. That would be impressive. It's amazing when you see chance after chance for God to step in, new sheriff in town, new set of rules. We're going to cure cancer. We're going to cure COVID. All these chances. God is just too shy. It doesn't work that way. And his defenders come in and support him every time.
Yes, Ogden Nash, the Lord in his wisdom gave us the fly and then forgot to tell us why.
Nice.
I volunteer in a cancer hospital, and I can't tell you how many times that people praise God because he's healing me. And I really desperately want to say, then why are you in the hospital? Why can't he heal you at home?
Right.
And I said, I just always say, oh yeah, we have really great doctors and science here. But
Must be hard to bite your tongue that way.
oh yes, it is. It is. Sometimes, yes. But anyway. Well, any other questions, Mr. Young? Mr. Young is the one I warned you about. Go ahead, Jim Young.
You should be warned about me. I want to just say a little short thing about purpose.
I was asked the question, what is the purpose for the creation of human beings? And I did point out that that was a very loaded question that suggested that there was a designer and creator and what have you. But going further, I pointed out that most fundamentalist Christians claim that the purpose of human existence is to serve God. And that servitude is nothing but a fancy word for slavery. So if your whole purpose in life, or your whole purpose of being here and having a life, is to be a slave to a supernatural being, that's pretty fucked up. It's a lot like North Korea. That's all I had to say.
And you see in the New Testament, Jesus having an opportunity to reject slavery, not doing it, which to some extent kind of makes sense because, again, seeing him from an apocalyptic standpoint, the end is nigh. I mean, the end is around the corner. So, you know, we got bigger fish to fry than slavery. Yeah, not that great a thing, especially if it's you, but whatever. You know, let's get right with God because he's coming really quick. Not kidding. Which I can't help but go off into the whole question of slavery in general. Why is it? It's regulated. God regulates it in the Bible. He doesn't prohibit it. And I can't count the number of times I've read Christian articles which say, "Oh yeah, but slavery in the New World was very different from slavery in the Bible." It's pretty much identical. Sorry for the tangent.
That's okay. Yeah, we had we had a legislator here who introduced a bill that said any political party that ever supported slavery could not be registered to run candidates in this state. And of course he's a Republican, and this is the Democratic Party he was trying to get out, not to be able to run in the state. So since then they're in the 1800s, they supported slavery in their statements. So, and I had just thought of something else I wanted to ask you about. Oh, I know what it was. As I said, I've been watching Genetically Modified Skeptic quite a bit, and he talked about this Netflix show called Midnight Mass. Have you heard about that?
Heard of it, not watched it though.
Yeah. Well, I watched the whole thing. It's only 7 episodes. And it was really interesting because he addressed it from the fact he was a fundamentalist as I was too. I brought up a fundamentalist, and he was addressing it from the fact that this showed how fundamentalism works and how cults develop. And it really does. And I have to say, it's one of the few movies that I've seen from anyone who treated atheism with respect. So there's nothing, it's a lot's in dark, you can't see anything, but there's nothing really too gross about it, but for it to be a horror show. So it was really quite interesting. So I recommend it to everyone. Any other questions or comments before we let?
Yeah, another movie that treats at least agnostics as a hero is one called Elmer Gantry.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and the one who played the preacher in Elmer Gantry, Burke Lancaster, purposely picked that role because he felt that people shouldn't glorify priests. Like, he turned down a role that in another movie that made a priest a hero, and he said, no, I want to do one that's controversial because Burt Lancaster was an atheist and he played the priest in that movie. It was a brilliant movie. Brilliant. He played that role so fire. And the real hero is the agnostic guy. Yeah, so that's another movie where the atheist is kind of treated positively.
Did anybody see the God's Not Dead series of movies?
No.
It's just, I've heard it called persecution porn. It's just, Christians love to, everyone's mean to me,
Yes.
that sort of thing. And if you watch the first one, this atheist professor is, giving a hard time to this Christian freshman. And, if I were there and I saw that, I would be the first to go down to the dean and tell him, get a rein in this professor. This is not kosher. This is not cool. But poorly, I mean, it's as to pat Christians on the head. I suppose that was the goal, and that's what it did.
Yeah.
And by the way, if anybody, I blog about stuff and neat ideas. So if anybody has any suggestions for ideas you haven't seen done, or even ones you have seen done, and maybe I need to know about it for my blog, please maybe pass them on to Judy, and she can pass them on to me, because I'm always looking for good ideas.
All right. I put a link in the chat again to Only Sky and to, I'll put it out here again because we had somebody join. Only Sky and the 2 Minute Christianity site, because I do think people will find your writings to be very interesting and very thought-provoking. I'm looking forward to seeing more of what you get out there. So I wanted to thank you very much. I know we're tying up a little bit early, but it's been quite an exercise in discussions, and I really enjoyed it. The next meeting we're having is going to be on the 26th of 2023. And it will be, let me just mute some people here, with Bertha Vasquez, and she is with CFI, the Evolution Institute, and she will be talking with us about teaching. She teaches teachers to teach evolution. So I think that will be interesting, because we are in Florida and they do not want to teach evolution here. So
Judy, could you give that date again?
March 26th. It will be at 5 o'clock. And I think it will be Martha, where did I put, that's not, what am I doing? I think I've got the wrong thing there. No, I don't. Okay. I'll put a link to her the ties. It's called Ties Education, and I can't remember what it stands for, but it's a CFI group. Okay, anybody want to say before we?
Yeah, just a rhetorical question that would end us nicely. If God was so perfect, right, and he created Earth and everything perfect, why did he need a plan B for humanity? You know,
we should have heaven on earth.
Yeah.
Why this winnowing process called life? I mean, why not just create only people who are good enough for heaven, and off they go?
Yes,
of course,
and
you
if
know.
he knows everything. He already knows who's going to heaven anyway. So why bother with all of this?
And Jesus said, narrow is the gate and few are the ones that find it to get into paradise. So he's admitting right up front that this whole process creates a majority of people who are going to fry in hell forever.
That's right. There's a stairway to heaven, but there's a highway to hell.
And if it's intelligent design, who in the world would have designed birthing in anybody the way we reproduce? It doesn't make any sense.
Well, if you guys hadn't offered the fruit, just saying.
No, that was the pain. That was the pain that came with it. It's still messy and disgusting.
Actually, have you ever heard of the Protestant purgatory?
No.
There's a few Protestant religions that believe that when people die, they don't automatically go to heaven. What they do is they go to sleep.
Yes.
And then in the end, when when the resurrection, like the rising comes up,
Yes,
those who pass muster go to heaven, and those who were died before Jesus came get a chance to say, do you accept Jesus or not? And then of course they get figured out. And those that reject it automatically go into the lake of fire to suffer a second death. And quite a few of these Protestants believe that the second death is not an eternal hell for the soul, but a place where the essence of the person just burns up and doesn't exist anymore. And that's why it's called the second death, because you're gone. You know, you don't survive to burn and burn forever. You're gone. You're just finished, like you're burnt to ash, just like the garbage pile. You're just gone.
yeah.
Makes sense.
Why couldn't we just have the first death be the same as the second death, and we could save all the rigmarole in between?
Exactly. So why did God need a plan B if he was perfect and did everything right the first time?
Well,
That's, just a thought.
well, he already knew he wasn't perfect because he had to destroy everybody except the people on the ark. But
Oops, plan C. I can't.
all right. The other thing I would recommend to you, I don't know if you watched it, was The Good Place. That was a
I like
interesting.
that.
Yeah, I liked it.
What was that first one that was the series?
The Good Place?
Judy? The first Netflix series?
Oh, the first Midnight Mass was the Netflix series.
Okay.
Although Good Place is showing on Netflix also.
Okay, I'll try to remember those. Thanks.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Enjoyed it I hope you got something out of this, and I know I got quite a bit out of it. So thank you for joining us today from Seattle.
If you are pleased with our programs, please tap the like button and then subscribe to our channel. Don't forget the bell so you don't miss any notices of new material. We usually post new content every week. See our created playlists to discover events thus far this year, or to see a list of topics and speakers from our rapidly growing and diverse collection since 1992.